Last time we looked at the meaning and scope of sociology. Today I want us to focus our attention on what led to the development of the field of sociology. So I want us to look at factors that contributed to the emergence of sociology as a field of study or as a discipline. This is important because every discipline has a history and has a context within which its pioneers constructed. So our discussion today will focus on what led to the development or to the emergence of sociology as a discipline. Maybe we need to have a recap of what sociology is, so that from there we can then move to look into the factors that led to the emergence and subsequent development of the discipline of sociology. We need to recall that sociology is a systematic and scientific study of human social behavior. It is concerned with understanding how individual behavior is shaped by factors such as the influence of groups to which such individuals belong. Such groups could be families, schools, and even peers. But the discipline is also concerned about the social categories in which groups find themselves in, or individuals can trace themselves to, such as race, age, gender, and even social class. How is our belongingness in this group determined, and how are we treated in these groups, and how do other groups or social categories that we don't belong perceive us? That is also another concern of sociology. It's also interesting in understanding how individuals are taught to behave by those they interact with. For instance, how are they taught by their peers, by their friends, and even professional seniors? So that how much does an employee learn from his seniors in terms of time management, dispute resolution and management, and other work values? Is there something that juniors can learn from their seniors in terms of this? Lastly, sociology focuses on the mutual influence between individuals and society. That is, how are behaviors of individuals affect society, and how are societal factors affecting and shaping individuals in terms of how they behave and in terms of how they carry themselves. So this is the task that sociologists and sociology as a discipline seeks to address and understand. With that background of what sociology is and the various issues that sociology seeks to address, I now want us to pay our attention, or to turn our attention to the factors that led to the development of sociology as a discipline. These factors are also called the social forces. Forces in the sense that they made society be perceived differently from the way it was before. So the occurrence of this made people start to think how a society needs to be understood, because there were things that happened that completely society imagined could not happen. And that's why they are considered as forces. So one of the forces or factors that led to the development of sociology is the political revolutions. By revolutions, we mean sudden changes in the way political activities are done. The revolutions that we're making reference to here occurred in Western Europe, starting with France, moving to England, Portugal, Spain, and other countries that by this time were led by monarchies. Citizens got fed up with the way they were being governed, and they felt that enough is enough. They rose up in arms and overthrew the monarchies in their positions. And from there on, power and those who hold power was determined by the citizens. So the French Revolution was one of these revolutions that had marked history in the sense that it was quite violent, very dramatic, and very radical. So it sets the pace upon which other revolutions in Europe were conducted. It should be noted that these revolutions led to chaos and disorder because people were killed, rules were not being followed, and therefore it was important to understand how this chaos and disorder were affecting society or were initiating change or feeding into change that was going on in society. There was need for an understanding of their causes. Why were people violent? What were the causes? But again, what are the consequences of these revolutions on society, so that an understanding of the causes and consequences of these revolutions could set a base upon which solutions to disorder that was existing then could be found. Because you cannot suggest to treat a disease without understanding the causes of those diseases. Therefore, scholars offered explanations of what they perceived or considered are the causes and the impacts of these revolutions of society. And these explanations that were offered by these scholars were later on embraced and considered as sociological perspectives or theories. For example, conflict theorists led by the likes of Karl Marx explained the revolutions and their accompanying consequences in terms of the oppression of the masses. They felt that the masses had had enough from the kings, and because of this oppression, they decided to rise up in arms. And therefore, according to him and his colleagues that subscribed to conflict perspective, the reason why these revolutions occurred was because citizens had reached a elastic limit as far as their oppression was concerned. They decided to rise up to challenge the authority in quite a violent manner. Others that subscribe to the school of functionalists felt that the reason why these revolutions were occurring was because there were disharmony among the various parts of institutions that exist in society. Elsewhere, we noted that one of the branches of sociology is the social institutions. And I mentioned that these institutions include the family, the state, the economy, religion, and education. These institutions must work in harmony for society to progress. Otherwise, any sense of disharmony will lead to chaos and disorders. And this is exactly what functionalists believed led to the revolutions, the violence, and the disorder that followed the revolutions, political revolutions that occurred in much of Western Europe in the 18th century. The other factor that is considered to have contributed massively to the emergence of sociology is the Industrial Revolution. We need first to understand industrialization as a process by which societies are transformed from dependence on agriculture and homemade products to manufacturing. So that when a society transforms from agricultural production to manufacturing, and therefore depends much of what they consume from those sectors, then that is industrialization. Of course, the actual aspect of industrialization is quite complex and more than this definition. But we need to understand here that the development of the factory as a result of industrialization led to the movement of people from farms to factories to seek for employment, and this resulted in increase in both the number of cities and the size of their populations. It should be noted that when industries were set up, quite a lot of jobs that were being done in the farm were by people in the farm were now being done by machines. Combined harvesters, tractors, and others were invented. And in the process, it replaced human labor in the farms. That rendered the majority of people who worked in these farms jobless. And therefore, to eke a living, they needed to look for alternative sources of income. And this led to them moving to where factories were established in order to seek for employment as a means of earning their livelihoods. But we are saying here that this movement led to an increase in population where these factories were located, but it also led to the establishment of urban areas and cities. Therefore, industrial revolution also brought people from diverse backgrounds to work and live in the same resident areas. It also changed people from production to consumption, and also there was a shift from home ownership to house leasing. We need to emphasize here that the fact that people came from different backgrounds and assembled around factories meant that there was no single culture that was dominant, and therefore that diversity created a mix, and in the process there was both confusion by some members, but also there was the need for these people to find how best they can integrate within the diversified culture. But more important is the fact that the emergence of industries led to certain problems that emerged, such as the need for people to come together, to work together, and to see how best they can satisfy their needs. Because of this, it became important that explanations were to be given by social thinkers about what was happening in these factories and also around them. And these thinkers felt that for them to fully understand what was happening as a result of industrialization, it was important for them to undertake empirical studies. They felt that if they used and domesticated methods of research that were being used by natural scientists in biology, in physics, in chemistry, and others, and changed them a bit, then it was possible for them to fully understand the social phenomena around industrialization and the effects of what it had on people. So scientists, or rather social thinkers, applied methods that have been used in natural sciences with a view to understanding what was happening in these areas. So the fact that now human beings had to be understood within a social context meant that natural sciences, biology, physics, mathematics, and even chemistry that existed then, their principles could not be used to explain human behavior. And therefore, there was need for a new discipline to be used to understand how human beings from different cultures interact and how they live and how they satisfy their needs. That became important. And for this reason, sociology became an important tool or an important avenue of understanding how these people lived and how they solved the problems that could emerge and also met their needs. The other factor that led to the development of sociology is urbanization. By urbanization, we mean the process by which an increasing proportion of a population lives in cities rather than in rural areas. Population shifted from rural agricultural ecology to an urban industrial ecology, with one major consequences of this movement being the social dislocation and the cultural lag. By the social dislocation, we mean the separation of members of primary groups such as family, as some were left in rural areas while others moved to urban areas in search of wage employment. This resulted in cultural disharmony, and because of this, some people found themselves in urban areas where the context was quite different from what they were used to in rural areas. They met people whom they had no prior knowledge about. Their cultural backgrounds were completely different, and therefore inability to fit and integrate in such an urban area became quite difficult. And all this confusion meant that there were problems that came. For instance, we had the problems of new values and rapid social change of values and norms, overpopulation, noise, and even population diversity. These were completely new to quite a number of people because it was a socio-cultural environment that was quite different from what they were used to in rural areas. Other problems also existed, such as inadequate housing as a result of the growth of human population in cities and in towns. There's also the problem of crowding. There was also the problem of unsanitary conditions, that is hygiene, lack of adequate hygiene. Poverty was also evident, especially in slums. Pollution became common, and which was quite different from what these were used to in rural areas. There also increased case of crime, and well as low wages because of population and desperation that quite a number of people faced. Factory owners decided to exploit them, being overworked and paid quite little. Above all, there was also the problem of child labor. This is because of poverty and low wages. Households were forced to deploy every member of the household in search of livelihood, some of which were still underage. Again, other problems that were noticeable were cases of suicide rose. There were cases of family separation and divorce, family violence, prostitution, among others, emerged. These were vices that were quite conspicuous with urban population and quite rare, if any, in or among the rural communities. And therefore, as these conditions became more visible, a new breed of social thinkers turned its attention to try to understand why and how society was changing. These explanations and the changes could not be adequately provided by thinkers from other disciplines other than those in sociology. So, again, through this, sociology was developed so that people and societies can be studied in a different way from the way natural scientists were undertaking their studies within a natural science context. The other factor that led to the development of sociology is the changes in religion. Religion as a social institution that is primarily concerned with social control declined significantly, and its importance and practices changed. It was noted that people no longer resorted to religion to explain their situations, such as poverty, unemployment, sickness, among others. Previously, people relied on religion to provide them with solutions and explanations to their plight. It was no longer the case. Again, it was no longer fanciful to explain anything basing on the Almighty. That is, people could not attribute what was happening to some supernatural. That is the Almighty God. This is because of the fact that people could not trust what religious leaders were telling them, and the teachings appear to have changed. Because of the decline in the stature of the religion, it became quite difficult for people to believe in the religious leaders and to turn up to religion for solutions to their problems. Again, the situation was worsened by the new thinking that was being injected by scholars into understanding what religion is. For instance, Karl Marx branded religion as an opium of the people and a means of oppressing the masses. So, people increasingly perceive religion as an oppressive institution that at all costs must be rejected. Furthermore, there are also advances in sciences that led to explanations of phenomena using facts and scientific principles. Sicknesses were explained in terms of their causes, scientific causes. Poverty was explained in terms of the scientific causes, and others explanations were backed by empirical findings. In that case, therefore, belief in religion as a means of understanding or as a solution to problems that was facing humanity became less and less. There was need, because of that, for cause-effect explanation of issues using empirical inquiries based on well-understood methodologies. Sociology, as we are going to see later, among its founding scholars, developed methods that could be used to understand what is happening in society and their causes. And because of that, because of the fact that religion was no longer relied on to provide explanation and answers to what was happening, people now turned their attention to other explanations. And in this case, social thinkers took center stage in terms of guiding society about what was happening with reference to research and facts that could be used to explain and support certain positions that were taken with regard to what was happening in society. The other factor, which is the last factor according to a discussion that led to the development of sociology, is the rise of socialism. Socialism was in reaction to capitalism and industrialization. It was noted that capitalism had created class division in terms of wealth and property ownership. There was therefore need for a new way of understanding how society can be integrated. And this was proposed by scholars such as Karl Marx, who advocated for a parallel system to capitalism, which is socialism. And socialism was more concerned with the social reforms that were necessary so that the gap between the rich and the poor is narrow. Again, proponents of socialism considered the then prevailing society as being unjust because it was driven purely by pursuit of personal profits at the expense of group well-being. Socialism therefore offered to create a society in which members are served indiscriminately and their needs provided for without preconditions. So the need to understand or to create a parallel or a paradigm shift in terms of how society, member society interacted led to the rise of socialism. And because of this, social thinkers had to quickly see how well to shape up the new paradigm so that the dominant paradigm, which was capitalism, can be challenged and society can see other paradigms that are more that could be more effective in bringing members of society together. Those are some of the factors that led to the development of sociology. Thank you so much for your time.